Good afternoon, everybody. Well, midday, everybody. How's everybody doing? You should be on mute. Hopefully you can hear me. And it's been a long time since we've done one of these. So let me fix my camera here. It's going to be a good little information session. Yes, of course, we know that they're not having the government shutdown now, but I think there's a lot to cover about it anyway. So there's a meeting group chat open in the bottom right corner for those of you that can go right to it. Send questions directly to me if you don't mind. In the group chat, you can drop down on the menu and just put right to me, to Tim. That way, when you have questions during the meeting, I'll make sure to address them. I think we're gonna have a lot of fun today. Again, my marketing guy, Mike, is not around. So my audio visual person, he's not there to help me. So bear with me as we're gonna get through this. But I think it's pretty important just to make sure we're understanding exactly where we stand these days. Remember, we're not here to figure out a political side. This isn't the point of that. You know, go to CNN or Fox News or The Hill or read The Onion or Reuters or things like that for your bending sides, whatever they have. What we want to do is just get a history of where we are, right? Has this happened before? How does it affect you on a macro sense? How does it affect you personally? And that's really what we want to cover. So very excited to do this. Plus we're being recorded too. So I'll try not to mess up too bad, or Mike really will have my head. So government shutdown 2023. What does this mean to us? So I'm going to make sure I'm looking at my notes here. But really, what has happened is a very normal situation, although it feels very polarized. It feels weaponized these days, and it seems to be that way. But again, we've been through historical shutdowns before, spending gaps before, but it just seems a lot of times nowadays they're used for different purposes rather than trying to meet in the middle, a bipartisan solution, right? It seems more of a political kind of siding. But we now know today, Kevin McCarthy, he got ousted as Speaker of the House. He is removed, and the very own North Carolina Patrick McHenry is taking over for a little bit. Who knows where that leads? You know, what's that going to handle in the short term? But again, what does it tell us? The House is in a state of disarray right now. It makes us worried. We read a ton of headlines, both sides, both biases leaning towards one party's going to do this and it's going to affect us in this way. Again, remember, ultimately, when we get there, the US equity markets don't care, right? It's a private sector. They are making their widgets. They're having their goods and services. And yes, there can be political turmoil, geopolitical turmoil. But at the end of the day, they are well aware and they are going to operate independently and try to raise their share price. So that doesn't affect everybody, because a lot of you on the call here are also worried about bond markets, fixed income. You know, how are my banks doing? Are they solvent? Are we going to be safe in the long run? Right? So we're going to make sure to address that. But let's start off, because I always like to do this, a little bit of history on government shutdowns, right? So government shutdown, what is it exactly? So it's really when the president and Congress fail to match up on a budget. Right? There's the government agencies that need to be funded every year. Yes, we know we're in a huge debt right now, $33 trillion. But really, every year they need to make sure that these agencies are funded. And if they don't have these funding mechanisms in place and both agreed, they go into a gap and thus can move into a government shutdown. Now, that is by law, by the 1982 Anti-Deficiency Act. In fact, 1982 is when it was codified to really be enacted, but this thing had been around for a long time. Basically an act saying, if we can't agree, we have to shut things down for the good of the American people. Okay, makes sense. In 1982, they really started to enforce that. Now, I've got a couple of little Jeopardy questions and things for you as we go through, and even got some fun slides. Well, not fun, because it talks about credit ratings and default. So I may not be the best slides for you, but certainly it helps drive the point. So it really does say the Anti-Deficiency Act says the government must shut down these agencies when they're in question. Not all of them, right? It's just the ones in question. Non-essential personnel need to be furloughed. Any activities that are not a matter of national security do need to be shut down. That is what we just avoided. But again, this has been happened before. Anybody on Medicare and Social Security, government benefits, those do not go away. Okay, we know that those don't go away. Yes, they are under strain as far as the annual budget or the annual deficit that we have to pay into as a program. Yes. But as far as that act is concerned, when there is a government shutdown, those benefits continue. So anybody in that space, rest assured that those things will come. Now, what will happen? Social Security workers and Medicare workers and departments may be shut down, right? You may not be able to get an application in if there is a government shutdown during these times, but the benefits will continue to roll in. And that's a very important safety knowledge to know, right? So there have been 20 funding gaps, interestingly enough. So let's go through some fun facts. There's a funding gap, and then there's the government shutdown. There's been 20 funding gaps since 1977. But really, the shutdowns are what has been making all of the headlines now. 1982, who was president? You can't, it's on mute, so you won't be able to say, but Reagan was president, and everybody thinks he was the first person that was that holds the champion title for the first government shutdown. In fact, he's not, although he did set the record. It was the man before, Jimmy Carter, 1980. The FTC was the single institution that was shut down for, I think, 4 days. But he holds the title. He wears the crown for the first U.S. federal shutdown. Welcome, Jimmy. That's a good man. Except Reagan really, he set the tone beyond that, because I think the impact for Carter was less than $1 million with the shutdown. Again, it really wasn't politically motivated. It just felt like the two edges didn't match up. Something happened. They had to play ball by the act. And then, of course, Congress and the president made a resolution. Reagan, right after that, he actually shut down the entire government over his illustrious career. So he may not have the first honors, but he certainly wears the crown for the biggest impact during his presidential stint. So congrats to Reagan on that one. Afterwards, it felt like it has moved, and we're going to do this great history lesson here between Clinton, Obama, Trump, and where we are now with Biden. It seems really as though Congress is weaponizing a lot now with these gaps and these potential to shut down the government. It happened with the Clinton administration. There was the biggest shutdown, the prolonged shutdown was Clinton, when he was trying to get education, health, environmental policies passed. Congress decided to stop that and stymie that for 21 days. Slight disagreement, but it was the first time we all kind of stepped back and said, oh, this can happen for a long period of time. Remember, most of these pre-Clinton, and actually during Obama and Trump for a couple of occasions, these were very short. These things can last a day. These things can last 5 days at a max before they really come to senses. It's these prolonged ones that we're worried about. And I think that is what most of us who are on this call were in fact worried about, that this wouldn't just be a government shutdown. It would be a standstill, right? A standoff. How long can we make us, the American people, suffer? Then we do what we naturally do personally. Oh my gosh, how is that going to affect my benefits? How is that going to affect my bank account, the bank accounts that I have, CDs? Are banks going to go illiquid? Is the stock market going to tank? How about U.S. credit ratings, things like that? And we're going to see it a little earlier or a little later on too. But again, these things have happened. They have been prolonged. Right after was Obama. I mean, there was a lot of issue with the Affordable Care Act. That was the White House's bargaining chip. And then Congress came right back on the other side, and that was their fighting plan against the ACA, or at least some parts, right? And remember, we're not here to choose political sides. I don't want to hear a bunch of group chats about, Obamacare or, the wall and Mexico border. That's not what we're here to do. Go to your Reddit groups or go to Twitter or any place like that to go have it. What we want to do is just understand the macro impact, the macro history and then ultimately what we, TradeWinds, our group, our people here can do to support you through that. That's the most important thing, ultimately how it affects you. So Obama, 16 days was his in October of 2013 over the ACA. President Trump at that point, he holds the absolute title for the longest shutdown in government history. I mean, a tough title to have, but I'm sure he'd like to have a title nonetheless. That was over the US-Mexico border wall. So again, that was where we had the last recent memory of furloughed employees. Big institutions were shut down. We kind of wondered what was happening. We were hoping this thing would be short, and it wasn't. It was actually 35 days, the longest in US history. So there's a really brief excerpt on how a weaponized Congress and a weaponizing of the White House can be used by doing government shutdowns. What's the sad part of that? We get to suffer, right? We get to suffer. I think it caused a lot of divisiveness between the political parties. I think a lot of people who are maybe on the fence and neutral are scared to take a side. I think we just kind of hunker down if we're a centrist kind of feel. And then the other sides really get emblazed, and they really like to fight and make some divisiveness or some put some cracks in the other side. And you can see that, unfortunately, some infighting in the House with McCarthy being taken out. That gives me a lot of pause to say, one, it's unfortunate. I know you may not be scared is the right answer, but you're certainly nervous and wondering who's leading this ship. We all are saying that. I'm here to say confidently, this is not the first time. It's not going to be the last time. The United States is still very, very high up in the rest of the world for credit ratings and strength. Yes, we have record debt, but at 33 trillion is going to be 50 trillion one day. We're going to look and see $50 trillion, and it, maybe that's just something we continue to roll over. It's an unfortunate event, but more than likely that will continue to happen. And we'll see a chart on it as well. The Biden administration. So here it is. Here's what got averted or kicked down the road until November 17th. October 1st, the stopgap bill was signed in. And again, just a couple of hours before, this was supposed to go into shutdown mode. We had some people at the Securities Exchange Commission, actually our compliance officer even had friends at the SEC that told them they were not planning to show up on Monday. I mean, it was that close. And of course, at midnight, these things were signed. Pushes us off to November 17th. All that did was kick the can down the road. Nothing has actually been changed. There has been no meeting in the middle yet. We're just going to have to be in a wait and see. What can that do? We know a few options are. They will kick it down further, right? There are a couple of flags that will pop up and things starting January of next year. There will be some reversions that can happen. It'll kick down the road. They will come to some kind of consensus. They will come to an agreement thwarting this issue we're having right now. They're going to need some leadership in the House. They're going to have to really figure out a good way to come to consensus. And then the last one here is we go into a shutdown, and the programs that are on the table for funding workers can be furloughed, programs can be shut down. That can affect local state governments if that is prolonged over a period of time. Any kind of federal grants, program reimbursements, anything where a state government is being supported, that can actually trickle down and affect us locally. So the American people could ultimately get hurt in the long run, not just not being able to go to a park or anything where you can't get your US postal mail will still be delivered, but maybe you're going to have an issue with timing. Maybe, some things, delivery services get shut down a little bit. We'll be affected, certainly. But really, we're talking more about state programs, state government programs, not Medicare or Social Security related, remember. I think the big thing, again, is what is the US market impact? That's where we want to shift to. So aside from general chaos, I'm making sure I get my notes, so I'm looking down a little bit. But aside from just the general chaos and just the confidence tremors that happen with this. What really can hurt us? Sovereign credit ratings is a big deal, right? That is something that if you're not quite aware of, let's just go through what it is. The biggest thing the United States has always had has shifted back in 2011, but we've always really relied on is our full faith in credit, our highest rating, the AAA rating that had been dropped down 12 years ago was the first initial one. But the United States is still a very creditable country, although I think one of the biggest concerns is we will continue to slip down that chart. And that can be a very unnerving space to be in. I do want to show you this here, and I'm hoping that share screen will work. This is a history over the short term of the credit ratings. Back in 2008, of the 3 top credit institutions, there are some others, Duns and Bradstreets and things of that nature, but really Mitch, Moody's, and S&P 500. The United States has always historically been a AAA rated country. And what does that mean? That means that our ability to service debt nationally and internationally is at the highest rating. And they look at us for things like GDP growth, per capita income, the inflation growth and the inflation rate that we have. Our present debt gets into that ratio and that algorithm for our credit rating, even though our present debt is as high as it's ever been. Default history, things of that nature. The United States, again, we're the most massive lenders out there, and we're holding the most massive debt that's really out there for us. I think the biggest thing that we need to understand is we were actually downgraded by the Standards & Poor back in 2011, right here. It had been, if you could think back, 100 years, it's going to be this blue the whole time, and the S&P decided to change that. Look up at the history on as to why. I mean, obviously it was, a lot of it had to do right after the 07, 08, 09 crash, the resurgence, but really there was some issues here with how the Standards & Poor was rating a lot of those mortgage-backed securities too. So this is actually a really interesting history on the downgrade. Just recently here, August, Fitch has downgraded us from the illustrious AAA rating to the AA plus. So again, just one hair down, the worry is that the United States will continue to slip. That is a little worrisome. I'll stop share so my face may jump up here. I think the biggest worry again is if we're having leadership disagreements, right, and we're having continued budget shutdowns, emergency stopgap bills, political infighting, the ratings agencies, the rest of the countries are going to take a really good look at us, and they're going to start to wonder our ability to service that debt. And so I think that would be the biggest tremor in the short run. Remember, it's always a short run play because we can never, ever, ever try to forecast what's going to happen 5 years out. We can barely forecast 40 days out, right? So we can never take ourselves and then project ourselves for 10 years. It would never work. Too many things will happen. Too many political parties will change. Our credit rating may get moved back up and everything goes swimmingly, right? We're not even going to talk about AI's impact. That's a whole other seminar, right? The impact of artificial intelligence. But that's where we are as far as the United States impact. I do want to let you know that on a local level, ultimately, what does that mean to you? I'm going to show you one more chart about where the United States is, especially for those that are holding fixed income, that have a little bit more or less equity exposure, that, hey, these bonds are important to us. United States debt, the ability to be accredited nation, a high sovereign debt rating. We need to make sure that we understand that the United States really is one of the top countries, even though it was downgraded. I hope you can see this. I'm assuming you can. So this is us right here. It's still a top tiered country. It may not be the very front, but out of the 195 countries that are sitting across the planet, the United States really is one of the top rated, and even still rated at Moody's. And even if Moody's decides to join the pack here and bring them down a notch, it really is still setting amongst its peers in its ability to credit, right? And that's one of the resolves that I know we can focus on is United States ability or their inability to fail, right? I always still think, and I'll say it forever until I am proven quite wrong, the United States is not going to go out of business. It may shift its structure. It may shift what it excels at or how it positions itself, but the United States is not going to go out of business. There's too many things that are supporting this system. And quite honestly, there's just too many people dependent as U.S. American citizens for its survivability. So what does that mean to you all ultimately? Stop share. Ultimately, what does it mean? It really depends on you. Again, we looked big, we looked macro, we had some kind of fun on what a government shutdown is and who took the title first and what it ultimately means. But remember, even in prolonged shutdowns, I could show you a chart of the market. I won't bring in the S&P. I just have to believe me that even in those short times, the S&Ps have still gone up. The equity markets have still gone up. Ultimately for you, where are you in your current life situation? I see people on here that are in their 20s. I see people that are in their 70s. I see every part in between. And then that brings into account, are you saving? Are you managing debt? Are you done with work and you are now taking income out? Are you reliant on government programs? Are you saving money in a 401k, buying into a strained market, hopefully at a small value so that it goes up over time? That's really what we want to see. Focus on absolute certainty that those government benefits would not go away. Private sector will absolutely continue to operate. Remember, these are very, very intelligent companies, bright men, bright women that are running these companies. They know that there's some disarray here in the White House and in Congress. They know Washington, D.C. is kind of a dumpster fire right now. They know that they're going to be positioning politically for the who's going to take over the chair, right? Here comes the election, get ready. Here comes the state and local mudslinging ads. Here comes the he said, she said stuff. It's already happening and it's only going to be exponential. So these companies already know that. And if they need to go outside the borders of the United States, because most of the companies we buy are global companies, we're buying large and mega cap companies. We're not going to buy your small companies that can get really, really hurt if a state crumbles on them or if there's a federal program that they're surviving on. We're not doing that. We're going to be dealing with companies that can go outside of the United States. Globalization is a real thing. I'm not worried about the equity markets. Goods and services, consumables, lending, the young people working here, still putting money in their 401k, they're buying into these companies. So what do they ultimately care about? Their share price going up. It helps you out in the long run. Markets are global. I said that. Okay, so the safety side. So that's the growth side. Again, feel very good and confident about that. What is the safety side? So for those of us that have pulled back a little bit, we're not 100% equities. We're not creating an income right now and buying into a 401k and saving in what we think is a depressed market. So yay, great timing so we can make money. What happens if we're a 60-40 or a 70-30? What happens if our bank accounts are sitting there and we're worried about the survivability of those institutions? Great call. U.S. is still a top tier rated institution, but that doesn't mean we're beholden to their credit rating. Are we buying from really well-financed, liquid, top-tiered private institution, top banks? I'm not going to name them, right? That's a conversation we need to see and function with. Whatever banking institution you're with, do you trust them? Are they accountable, right? We're not going to have a Silicon Valley meltdown, right? Those are the times when maybe you go towards those bigger institutions and you buy a certificate of deposit and you get a really nice interest rate these days. Municipal securities for the state of North Carolina, if most of you are coming into the state of North Carolina, is still a fabulous state to buy, depending on where we are, revenue bond or general obligation bond. Are these good municipal securities worthwhile? They are. You can do risk transfer products like an annuity, the infamous annuity, but non-commissionable annuities. There's something else that are out there. There are annuities that you're not locked in for 8 years, these back-end charges where an advisor doesn't get paid 10% to get into these things. I mean, a risk transfer where you get a guaranteed stream of income, much like a Social Security. Those are parts that are out there. So these fixed income spaces are very, very much protected as well, right? Even if the government gets downgraded, even as inflation continues to run and there's a strain, if there's discord because of the national debt really striking us down, meaning programs really do go into a state of disarray. We find out, oh my gosh, Social Security really is having an issue and it's coming under strain and our benefits are going to get cut. Well, then we have a problem, right? Then we're all going to be glued to the television and we're going to find out the next parts. What do? Maybe we find silly, but something to really think about. If you have to pull a ripcord, you go to the top rated countries and you look at their sovereign debt. I'm not saying that. Please don't take that as an advice or an investment structure. That's not what I'm saying. But remember, in the unlikely event of a United States failure, there's the rest of the planet that still operates independently. Okay. Our job is to make sure that we're very aware. We're certainly answering your emails, picking up your phone calls, meeting with you to make sure that whatever's most important gets addressed. It's not for us or the talking heads on the television or the Twitter feeds to tell you what's happening on a macro level and then forcing that to apply to you. That's the opposite of how it should be. It is, where am I in my life? What are my ultimate needs? What can I control? And then how does that macro environment affect me? And all the other stuff that doesn't is wonderful noise, right? It is kabuki theater. It is there so you can be entertained, so that advertising ads can throw a 30-second commercial in between so you buy their product. That's what they're doing, as long as it doesn't affect you personally. But yes, I can tell by just the list of people here that this was something of great concern, but concern's not the right answer, or concern may not be the right word anymore. It is, I just need to understand where Tim is, where does he stand, how's the firm stand, and then maybe take a good account of what I actually think is most important. And again, it's you. Whatever's most important is what affects you personally. I do want to show this because I had to pull this up. I was laughable, but sometimes this is what life feels like for all of my nerds out there. That I don't know if you can see that, but that is Gandalf from Lord of the Rings when all of the darkness kind of comes in, or all of the turmoil and chaos. A lot of that is just your Twitter handle feeds and all the noise that's coming, and we're putting up this big kind of light around you and it feels like it's just collapsing in. I thought it was funny. Thanks for indulging me on that. But sometimes it feels like that. It feels like just this endless pressure coming in, because bad news always sells. It's never good news that sells. You're not going to see a lot happening of, look, we missed the government shutdown and immediately went to the House Speaker gets ousted and everybody knew it. What's next, right? If it's going to have some kind of consensus, it'll be short-lived, because I'm sure another bad news piece will come right behind it. Fine. Lastly, as I, again, pivot one more time, what does that mean? Your investment side. The investment side. Let's take a look at that allocation. Take a deep breath. Write down what your allocation is. Write down if that still matches up today based upon your standards. Are you 100% equity? Should you be? Okay. Take your age, take your income, take your feeling. Let's redesign that thing if we need to. But ultimately, the answer probably is no, right? Because if we're just talking about where we are now, a stopgap that's kicked out until mid-November, we don't know what's going to happen. More than likely, they're going to extend it again. And if the thing shuts down, we've just heard the history of it. The impact is relatively negligible on an equity portfolio. Nevertheless, your opinion and your emotions matter towards it. That's not me just saying we need to do this. If you're losing sleep, call me and we're going to make some adjustments. The financial plan is now critical. right? That is what a financial plan takes into account. Remember, anytime you are projecting out, whether that projection is 5 to 10 years because you are in a facility and you're transitioning to long-term care facility, or you're at the end of life, or you're at the beginning and you're starting a job and you have a young child, or you're right in the middle and you're going, oh my gosh, this is going to happen right before I claim Social Security. What is happening? Those algorithms, those projections take into account that kind of stuff happening, right? It's an average based over a long period of time because markets go like this. Now, you can't put in a variable for government shutdowns. They don't have that variable inside of the program. But certainly we have to understand that these averages do exactly this. Plan for the losses of 20%. Plan for disarray in the states of disarray, because we've had a really wonderful return. Not last year, but we've had a really wonderful return. We're hoping the end of this year really ends up, right? That we really are going to have some good consumerism by the end of the year, the infamous Santa Claus rally. So again, I appreciate what we're going through. If there's any questions, feel free to put them on individual to me. I can attempt to answer them right now. I'd be happy to. I'll also open my email if you just want to send me an email directly. But again, macroeconomics don't affect you, nor the United States infighting and polarization. These things have always gone on for us vets that have been in the game a long time. We know that these things do occur and do happen. There's not much we can do to change it. What we can do is really control the impact on us, and we control that by what? By where we are in a life assessment, changing our financial plan as we need to adapt and update it, and we make some tweaks to the investment side, but not reactionary tweaks, right? I want to sell a couple of securities within our portfolio, but it's only because they're disappointments, right? NextEra Energy, sorry, they're never going to watch this, but NextEra Energy is quite a disappointment right now, and we're going to just look to get rid of that and maybe needs to go. Nike, on the other hand, has been a disappointment, but they seem to really have stabilized a little bit. I'm going to continue to watch it, but that is not in reaction to a potential furlough of government employees. So I don't see. Oh, wait, I do have some messages. Oh, a couple of thank yous. Well, that was very sweet. I appreciate it. You know, in respect to that, this is important to you all. It's important to us. If this is something where, Tim, there are some things in the state of disarray, we need to understand your stance. We want to hear you on this kind of stage and level. We're here. Send us a topic, send us a time, and we'll make sure to get it out there. Even against my will, because I know Mike's going to put me out there and Tracy's going to put me out there, and it's going to happen. That's perfect. If you need it personally, because there's another death to it, we're going to see you individually, and we're going to go through and lay this out in total. We will take as long as you need. I think we're good here. I was supposed to be quick. We weren't supposed to tie you down for your whole lunch hour. I appreciate where we are. I guess, again, ultimately, remember this, bad news sells. Take your bend on either side of the spectrum for your news, but ultimately this is just another step over the history of our lives. We're good to go. I appreciate it. Have a great rest of the day. Feel free to call, email, and we'll see you soon. Thanks for attending, you all.